Diversity, equity, and inclusion, in my opinion, is an answer to helping to eradicate systemic and institutional racism in this country. But it has to be DE&I that is actionable. It has to be DE&I that is intentional. And it has to be DE&I initiative and efforts that come from the top. It can't just be a passive baton. Oh, I have a Brenda Joy who's over diversity, equity, and inclusion, and she handles that. No, it has to come from a perspective of inclusive leadership. That includes your board of directors. That includes your C-suite as well. And so when we look at who holds positions of power and authority in this country, it is no secret they are white males. And so the conversation has to be had, and including them in the conversation and the action of the work has to happen in order for real change and the eradication of systemic and institutional racism in this country. Otherwise, it's just complete conversation. I remember when this first jumped off, after the murder of George Floyd, my tag on all of my social media at the end was watch what they do, don't watch what they say. Because people can talk and say, oh, we're making this, enormous statement and we support Black Lives Matter and we this and we that. Well, then the question becomes, if that's what you're saying, then what are you doing? You can't just cut a check either. We done had enough of that. You cut checks to the NAACP, you cut checks to the Black Public Relations Society, you cut checks to Hispanic and Latino organizations, to LGBTQ organizations, but what are you doing to change systems, laws, policies, processes, and procedures? If you're not doing that, then you're not doing anything at all.
Now, I want to ask you a question because, for a long time, we would say D&I, 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 and now it's D-E and I.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to ask that question. Why is it so important now for that equity to be placed in there?
So equity, so let me real quickly in a minute, history of this work of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I've been in the work of diversity since the late 90s, when it was just diversity. It came about due to the abolishment, quote unquote, of affirmative action across corporate America. And so companies and organizations were trying to ensure that they were being corporately responsible and saying, we still believe in diversity. So it was just diversity. So that ran until like 2003, 2004. Then the conversation of diversity from a corporate perspective died down and went completely flat between 2004 to say 2007. When it arose again in 8 and 9, it arose with inclusion onto it. So it was just diversity and inclusion. Probably around 2012, 2013, they then added equity, because here's the deal. You can hire as many diverse individuals as you want to into an organization. You can include them in the conversation. You can invite them to the table. But if there is no equity in the work that you're doing, equity in pay, equity in succession planning, equity in outreach, equity in housing, equity in financial support from a fiscal perspective, equity in supporting the communities, meaning giving individuals what they need in order to succeed. Because people think that equity and equality are the same things, and they are not. They are two totally different things. And so equity is even more important than anything. Then when the murder of George Floyd happened, the conversation really just shifted to more on the emphasis of equity due to the racial reckoning that's going on, because that's where equity really, that's where the gap is when you start talking about equity. It affects those that are part of, which I hate this word, which is marginalized, but it hits marginalized groups, which basically means those that are minority groups, disabilities, LGBTQ, Black
Right.
people, African American. It hits them in that aspect even greater. So that's where the true change of leveling out this thing we call dismantling systemic and institutional racism systems, because that's what they do. They rob people of equity.
Okay, hold on. So great, Brenda.
I'm gonna do my best to follow Miss Darlene up.
I know, but
you know what? She already jumped ahead a little bit, and I'm glad I get to piggyback on this because I'm just gonna start by letting you know we start addressing systemic and institutional racism head on. The eggshell moments are over. Systemic racism is not something that we can no longer handle with kids' gloves within the corporate realm or anywhere else in our society. But it was something Darlene said when she was responding about the corporate and within the corporate realm. How does that work? Just to give you a little bit of backstory of how my position came about. I was actually offered a human resources position with 42S right before the pandemic. And thanks to the pandemic, the offer was rescinded. But things happen for a reason. During that time, I took some courses. I just enriched my life. Unfortunately, George Floyd was killed in front of everybody. And that's what got a lot of companies to thinking, okay, our employees are like saying we want changes now. And maybe 2 weeks after George Floyd was killed, my phone rang. And it was the woman who would have been my boss, who's now my boss. She said, the head of Dolphin. So Dolphin is a company that has 5 subsidiary companies across the board. Wanted to know if you were wanting to re-engage with us about the position that was offered to you back in February. And I thought to myself, that was 42S, which is one of the companies. And I said, okay, yes. I was waiting for my phone to ring, but definitely yes. Yeah. So she said that he's meeting with the board, the heads of all the company, and he wanted to make sure he could put this out there. I'm like, I don't know what he's putting out there, but fine. A week later, because of the social climate and because they listened to their staff members, not just the junior staff members, they listened to everybody. They said they wanted change, and they wanted change now. They knew that some change would take time, but their biggest demand was, we need someone here to do diversity and inclusion. And they didn't care if it was female, male, they just wanted a Black person. So they came to me, and that is something I'm passionate about. And when they presented it to me, I said, that's even better than just HR. So now I'm D, and as of yesterday, DE and I for the entire Dolphin group of companies. And my first 2 weeks, I made sure to meet with all the heads of the companies. And I know that sounds very godfatherish, the 5 heads of the families, but I met with each CEO and president. And they all said they want change. They want to be a part of the change process. And I told them at that moment, it's one thing to say it. It's another thing to show it. Now, again, we're in the middle of a pandemic. We don't have a big budget. So unfortunately, the first training was me speaking to the entire company via video. They all liked it. It was about unconscious bias training. But then I brought in someone from the outside, someone I used to work with. And she brought in the history of agency and positioning. And it was a 2-hour training. So it was a mandatory, all DE&I trainings moving forward are mandatory. 98% of the staff was present because some were on vacation. But you want to know the third person who was on that Zoom call? Bill O'Dowd, the head of Dolphin. Then the CEO started popping in, then the president. So again, out of 143 employees, we had roughly 135 employees present, but this is where it really gets good. Not only did they listen to what Donita had to say, they engaged, they spoke up. And at the end of that training, I was sitting, of course, back smiling from ear to ear because it's like, there's involvement, there's people, they felt safe. And that's the whole intention of bringing in someone from the outside to create an even bigger safe space. But this is something I really want to share, and I printed it up so I could read it, hence the readers, and they come off after this. The day after our training last week, we have a monthly newsletter that drops on the 1st of every month. So I know that after we did this training, they went back and they changed what was already supposed to go out. And this is a quote from Bill O'Dowd, the chairman and CEO of Dolphin. I want to thank everyone for attending the training yesterday. We broke Zoom. Over 98% of the company was able to attend, with 2 people missing for vacation. That's an incredible number, and it matters. It shows that we care. It encourages us to continue to invest in these opportunities. And I bet it sent a message to Danita herself that the work she is doing is important to a lot of people that she had never met before yesterday. My heart feels great knowing that we delivered a good message back to her after she devoted 2 hours to deliver such a great message to us. So again, if you don't have that senior leadership involved, they can't just do the lip service. Yes, I'm grateful I have a salary now. Yes, I'm grateful that they took time to meet with me, but they know that they showed up and they engaged and they participated in all the feedback. I got great feedback from everyone across the super group, and they're ready for more. So to what Darlene said, you can't just say, oh, we ticked this box and we hired someone. That doesn't work anymore. You really do have to put your money where your mouth is. As Conroy Boxhill stated when I attended a different Beepers webinar, he said, show me the receipt. You told me what you did, but what's the return on that? You put something in, what did you get back from it? So I'm happy to say that I'm proud to work for a company who's doing what they said that they would do. They're supporting me, and they're engaging the staff, and they're engaging themselves, and that way change will come about. So that is actually how, and the only way we can eradicate it within the corporate realm. You can't just say, okay, I have this title, now what do you want me to do? It's like, no, you hire me, this is what I want to do, and this is what I need your support on. So you really have to hold them accountable, but it's even better when they are already accountable, when you don't have to chase them down.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So that's awesome. That's really amazing. I'm glad when I hear about things rolling from the top down, because it truly does start with leadership. It's like in the household, it starts with mom and dad. And you know, kids generally are a product of their own environment. But I want to take it to Eddie, because Eddie, you represent top athletes in the industry. And so it's a little different for you. You're not in corporate America per se. How does this question possibly pertain to you? Or has it affected, or how does that work with the clients that you have?
Well, first I want to apologize because Mike's Pence Fly is in my establishments now. So if you see me swatting and everything, that is why. You know, Mike Pence Fly is here. So I apologize that, you know.
No politics. We said no politics.
No politics, but he heard about the DEI and he sit the fly. So back to the question. Eloquently what Brenda and them said, you know, one thing people don't understand, and I'm gonna go from a sports to entertainment because I work with celebrities and athletes and corporations. What they both said was so true. And as you see now, one thing is about the action. Because what I was to add to that is we've been programmed so much from what to say, what to do. So now everyone's like, the programming has to change because we were told to listen to this, say this, and now we're like, it doesn't make sense. We're no longer agreeing with the status quo and what has been said. So now the programming and messages has to change. And I think the people who led that the most, that really not only during this pandemic, but allowed everyone to kind of really take this serious, was the NBA. When the NBA first shut down for COVID, it's like Hollywood, everybody else is like, oh, okay, the league shut down? So what do we do? And then the players took a step forward. They were like, okay, the WNBA did the same thing. Then they made sure to say, if you're going to watch us, we're going to let you know we are not happy about the oppression, social justice, the education, the reform, all those things. So if you don't want to hear about it, don't watch our games. Then they made sure we want it on the court. We want to see the action behind the money being put in place, the nonprofits. Then if you want to take it a step further, the Milwaukee Bucks said, we're not playing the game at all until we talk to the Lieutenant Governor, the Attorney General. And so when you say actions, it's taking some athletes, male and female, to help entertainers when it came to Hollywood, to the Oscars, to the Emmys. So everyone says, look, you guys have talked long enough. If you want us involved, you want us to actually perform, entertain, we need to see some action behind it. And we're not talking about no zeros. We need to see you either in the streets, We need to see some reform, and we also need to see some policies change. Now, for everyone who wants to say shut up and dribble, pick up a ball and all that, look, we've been past that. It's no longer acceptable. And there's still some leagues and athletes still trying to figure that out. They have done as much as possible, but now it's kind of like, I think, the voting is going to help. But the one thing you see from the sports entertainer, they feel helpless because they physically can't go to the policymakers and say, change this. But they can use their platforms, their foundations, their voices to say, look, we can't force you to change or do something, but we're going to make sure we put so much pressure on you that you're going to feel it. And either you're going to ride with us, or if we know you're on the other side, oh, don't come ask for no autograph. Don't come to my red carpet. Don't come to my game. Definitely don't come up here and ask me for something. We're going to have a conversation. Then I'll go sign it. Then I'll take a picture. But we're going to have a conversation first. And I think that's the best they can do right now, because as humans, the one thing they want to do is, look, put us in the streets, let's go to work. And they can't, because they still have to provide for their families. They still have to go on sets. They still have to be what they have been blessed to do, act, play sports. But at the end of the day is, how can we support the corporations and the diversity inclusions? Like you said, if you're going to hire me, I don't want just a title. Are you actually going to put in the work? And I'm so glad that the NFL finally got a brother to be DEI. And my first thing, I texted him on LinkedIn, I said, brother, anything I can do to help you do your job, let me know. Because at the end of the day is, I'm praying the league lets you do your job. Because the NFL still has one of the lowest scores out of all the professional leagues for diversity. And it's the most popular. It's more popular money-wise than the NBA. The NBA is the most popular worldwide, but money-wise, the NFL is still leading it. So what's that tell you? You're more focused on the money than the diversity. So those are the simple things I think, we all have to kind of work together and support. The politics now are leading the charge in every corporate, sports and entertainment, social justice community, and you can't get behind it. So now it's like you're drawing a line in the sand. Which side are you on? Because there's just, whether it was COVID or not, COVID just makes you, exposing you to say your true personality and character.
Yep. So I'm gonna, because all of you have somewhat, you guys messed my questions up. I was on a flow, so I'm gonna pivot. As my other board member says, I'm gonna pivot a little bit. The question was gonna be, what is the responsibility of corporate America, if any, in helping to dismantle the current systems? But I wanna switch that around a little bit. The initiatives that corporate America are doing right now, since the beginning of the year, do you think that it's truly helping? I'm gonna start with you, Eddie. Do you think that the initiatives that they are attempting to do is truly helping to dismantle these current systems?
No, but Darlene said something that's so key. She said equity versus equality. And one thing I can say, and this goes across the board, especially with our minorities, we no longer want to be equal. We want equity. If you want to work with us, we want equity now. Now, you may not give us full ownership, but we want ownership, because that way we can know what's the policies being put in place, what is actually the foundation, what needs to be changed. So if you have not noticed across all the board, everyone says, if you want to work with me, I want equity. Athletes, entertainers, especially the athletes. I love this now. I mean, look at Patrick Mahomes. He got all that $1 million contract, and he says, you know what? I'm now an owner. He's an owner while playing for the NFL team. So he can at least find out behind the scenes, okay, what is the ownership doing from the Kansas City Royals, but how does that affect the Kansas City Chiefs? Because if you know one owner, you kind of get in that little bubble to know what all the owners are thinking. And so you see a lot of clients and players, everybody active. We want equity. If you want to work with us, this is what I want, because it allows you now to understand the mindset of what the board, the C-suite, the president, the owners and the founders are thinking. And if you know what they're thinking, you at least go back with a plan and strategy and say, okay, this is what they're talking about. How do we help change this and implement it so we can still be successful, but benefit everyone? And so I feel like that is so very key, that we need to continue to increase and support those causes, because it allows our voices to be heard. But also, like we want to say, we need to know intel. We need to know what the enemy is thinking. If we can know what the enemy is thinking, we can call Brenda. We can, hey, look, so this is what happens. Can you give me a programming plan and how much it's gonna cost? I want to make sure I pay your rate, so I can go back to these people with a plan and proper and say, look, this is the strategy. This is what it's gonna cost. Are you willing to do this? And if they say no, then you really even know even more, because now you gave them the blueprint.
Right. So Darlene, I had you touch on equity, but I wanted to hit on Brenda Joy right quick, because you mentioned how, basically the initiatives that, Dolphin Entertainment has rolled out has been a success. Have you, being in that HR position, you're serving that dual role, have you been able to see a positive change in employees' behaviors or their sentiments because of leadership and because of the initiatives that Dolphin Entertainment has taken on?
It's blown my mind, and I'm not exaggerating. So again, my first 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, I spoke to every employee on the 42 West side, with the exception of 4 employees. This week, I just finished up speaking to all of the employees on the Surefire side. So one thing I kept hearing is, we're glad you're here, but it's not just about me. My boss, whose name is Linda, again, she hates me calling her boss, she and I have been tasked with bringing the entire super group onto one HR platform, meaning there's going to be new policies, new things put in place. And what I've heard from some people, and again, it's not just the Black and people of color who are trying to champion what we know we need and want and deserve. We have some straight up good allies out there. And one of my coworkers within the super group, she said, let's talk about equity. And I looked at her, I'm like, how old are you? And she said, I know for a fact that within PR itself, it's not a thing. It really is like, if you know somebody who knows somebody, you're going to get more because you know that person. Equity really does not exist within PR. And I know that because I actually came from another PR firm. So that being said, what I've shared with them, that as Linda and I pulled together these policies, equity is something that we are looking at. And for some, it's going to be new because, again, PR has been done a certain way for so long. It's almost like that buddy system, and there's no accountability. But now if you have 5 companies that are under one umbrella, it has to be a level playing field, because the one thing I told the senior leaders, employees talk and they share. So back in the day when we were getting our jobs, we didn't tell, my father didn't even know what I made. That was my business. Nowadays, they share. And when they share, they get upset and it becomes a hostile situation. But the other thing I told the leaders is, I'm on LinkedIn probably way too much, but I'm connected to some awesome people in our field, and I like to see what they're sharing. And that's what I'm also letting them know. Companies are sharing. And some of them are misstepping in their sharing, because if you have someone who's left that company and they know that you're just doing this and they know it's not a true smile, they're going to call you out. And we don't want to be called out. I told them that our approach will be one step, one day at a time. And after we had that training workshop last week, we went a deeper dive into the equity component. And again, like I said, as of yesterday, it's now DE&I for me, because that is my focus. We need to level the playing field. And again, as we do, they're going to share what's happening with Dolphin with other people, because again, PR is, I don't know if this is the proper word, it's kind of incestuous. It really is. It's scary to me. It's like everybody knows somebody who worked with somebody. And again, it gets out there. And then they'll start making demands where they are. And it's really that word of mouth, before technology, that's all we had was word of mouth. So again, we're addressing it our way. And again, it just really does help, again, when you know that the senior leaders are on board. But it also helps that you know what your coworkers want. They want more diversity, they want inclusion, but they want equity. They want it all. And it's my job to make sure that I help get them there.
Okay. So I'm just going to skip that other question that I had, because guys, but I'm gonna hit Darlene with this one. Darlene, I have in working with several companies, and I have run into ignorance, and when I say ignorance, I am not saying that in a derogatory way, right? And what I have witnessed is that it's truly generational. It just depends on who you're talking to. You know, some generations, the younger generations, let's talk about the younger millennials, or, you know, those Gen Zs, they have no idea, they have no understanding, no comprehension of why and what is going on in the world today. They're like, what is happening? Why is this happening? You know, in some public schools, as we know, history was cut out. Most schools, there was no Black history. And so you literally have a lot of the young workforce that are walking around today, and they are just ignorant, unintentional ignorance. And so, Darlene, when you go into these companies and you're working with your corporate partners, and I'm sure you're dealing with various age ranges, how does that work for you? Is there a shift in the way that you have to consult and present depending on your demographic? If it's a younger group, if it's you're dealing with the baby boomers, or if you have a mixed group, like, how does that work?
That's a great question, Jen. And so I'm going to answer that question, but I want to, before I go into that question, I want to bring some statistics really quickly to give the audience, to help them wrap their minds around when we talk about equity. You all are in the public relations field, PR field. So when we look at advertising, PR, marketing, that's, you know, pretty much a field that's lumped together within itself. There are only 7% minority representation in all of the marketing, public relations, and PR firms across the country. 7%. 20 years ago, I'm gonna even say 20, 30 years ago, it was 5% minority representation. We're talking ownership, we're talking employment, we're talking management, we're talking C-suite. So what that does is, when you don't have minority representation, LGBTQ, disabilities, veterans, it comes out in imaging and messaging. And so it all gets whitewashed. So then the whole world is beautiful because it's all white. The messaging is beautiful because it's all white, because there's no one at the table that looks different than the status quo. So therefore, you're gonna always have the same type of messaging and connotation around any product and or services. Same thing in the sporting industry. Equity is about ownership. You want Black people to run up and down the court, the field, the baseball diamond, even now folks are entering into the golfing arena, NASCAR, all of it, but there's no ownership, okay? And so I have to commend, when you talk about the NFL identifying their first diversity officer, the NBA does. 3 months ago, NASCAR just identified their first diversity officer. And so that is how you begin to create equity. You have to have voices at the table that don't look like the status quo. When you ask me the question, does my message have to change based upon the generations that I am speaking to when I go into organizations and do consulting or do training and talk to them about the importance of DE&I? To a degree, yes and no. Yes and no is in the sense of, at the beginning and the end of the day, the business case for this work is the business case. It can be explained to anybody because people understand dollars and cents. They understand recruitment and retention. They understand what the cost that it is hitting them in their pockets at the end of the day. And so it's a matter of how you go in and have this conversation and what you lead with. And you have to lead with helping them wrap their minds around the business case. And if you are in corporate America and you don't want to talk business, then you need to be doing something else. I don't know what you need to be doing. You need to be doing something else. And so that is the messaging that you have to start with. Here's the other thing too. You cannot do this work, regardless to what the generations are, without having a strategy. People think that, oh, diversity, I hire a Black person to run my diversity department, or I hire anyone to run my diversity department, and let me, brush my shoulders off because I my job. And it's like, no, sir, ma'am, you have not done your job, because the reality is to stand up true DE&I that is intentional and impactful, it is a 3 to 5 year process in order to truly stand it up. This is not a cakewalk. This is not a sprint. This is not even a marathon, okay? Because that's only 27 miles or 26 miles. This is a complete journey along the way. Now, is there a difference in the mindsets of the generations? Absolutely there is. There's a complete difference. And I'm going to give you an example. Our baby boomers, they've gone through the civil rights movement. They've lived through the 60s and the 40s and the 50s and the 70s. And so they have a different mindset around race and racial equity and the status quo of America and what's going on. I'm a Gen Xer. So as a Gen Xer, I'm kind of tossed between the two. I was raised by baby boomers, and so, but now, I have a little bit more education than they do. I've been exposed a little bit more to the world and to life and to experiences than they have. And so my mindset is a little bit different, and I may be a little bit more liberal. When it comes to millennials, they are even a little bit further removed than the Gen Xers and the baby boomers. But let me tell you, Gen Z, those babies, listen, they're having it, okay? This is why when you say they're like oblivious and they don't get it and they don't understand. And the reason for that is socioeconomics. Our parents as baby boomers, they had less money than we do as Gen Xers. Millennials have a little bit more money at a younger age than the Gen Xers. And so the exposure that you give to that the Gen Zs are getting, those babies, little do they know it, Black, brown, whatever, they're a little bit more privileged higher on the privilege scale than I was and than the baby boomers were. So their exposure and their mindset of being open to differences and embracing differences and embracing those that don't look like them and sound like them and come from where they come from is totally different. So their tolerance level for discrimination, their tolerance level for racism, their tolerance level for exclusion is at an all-time low. So if companies think that they're going to be competitive in the next 20 years, in the next 30 years, or the next 50 years, they are going to have to get on the journey of DE&I, or they're not going to have any employees, because these Zers who are becoming the largest between millennials and Gen Zs in the next 10 years, they will be the largest working population in society. And so if that's their mindset, companies need to get on the bandwagon so that they'll be able to meet the demands of the employees. Otherwise, they won't have any.
Okay.
Wow.
Miss Jennifer, I just want to add one more thing to what Ms. Darlene said. I just want to add one more thing because she gives stats. So I had to make sure I came with one stat.
Well, Eddie, I was about to ask you a question, but go ahead.
I got to, because we're representing Los Angeles, and I'm blessed to have a TV and film production client, CEO Breon Moses of Seven Hills Production, and based on UCLA's Hollywood Diversity Report in 2018, just 71% of the directors' top grossing films were women, 19.3% were people of color. And in 2019, women posted meaningful gains to reach only 15.1%, but minorities directed just 14.4% of the top box office movies, a slight increase over recent years. So women earned 14.8% of writing credits on a film analyzed in 2018, and minorities claimed 10.4%. So both figures improved for 2019 with just 17.4% of writing credits going to women and 13.9% to people of color, according to UCLA's Hollywood Diversity Report. So even with all the DEI and everything, that percentage is just moving this much, just this much. So I just want to confirm, even on that side from Ms. Darlene, say like the facts, like you got numbers now, people. We're not just talking no more. We got numbers.
Okay.
And here's the other thing. I know you got to ask a question, Jen. Let me just say this.
I know. Okay.
DE&I has only been literally corporations at this speed that we're going on for the last maybe 6 years. So Gucci, Facebook, Twitter, Amazon, Google, within the last 3 years, 2 to 3 years, they have just—
The Grammys.
You know what I mean? The Grammys, come on, literally just have identified the need for a person to handle this work in a department. So when you talk about the percentages inching, that is why, because we haven't been in it long enough as a society to make true impactful change. In 5 years from now, it should be more than just an inch. I'm sorry, Jen, go.
No, you fine.
Just to clarify, I have no stats to share. Just so you all know, I have no stats.
So, but Eddie, I was going to ask you, Eddie, you know, with you being in sports and dealing with, you know, a lot of NFL players, you know, over time, have you seen a huge difference? So, for instance, you know, the take a knee and, you know, and everything that's going on, the Black Lives Matter, do you see a grave difference in understanding, appreciation, fighting for a lack of better terms, between maybe the veteran players and the first and the rookies that are coming in? And if you do you believe that a lot of that is attributed to money of, I don't want to rock the boat, I need my bread, so I'm gonna go in here and act right? Are you seeing that as well, as far as age disparities in the NFL, as far, you know, as far as the support, or no?
So we've been blessed to work with NBA, NFL, WNBA, NASCAR, all the sports. And it's funny you asked that. During COVID, you know, I was talking to one of our players, Super Bowl champion Daniel Wilcox, and I said, you know, I want to know, because I've heard this from one guys, but now that you're removed, what it was the tone in the locker room for guys. And the first thing guys will always says is, we all wanted to, when Colin Kaepernick was doing this, let's go back a little bit. When Colin the first thing guys says, man, we all are ready. But the owner says, if anybody does anything to mess with the money, I'm messing with your money. So now, what is the one thing as a man you want to do? Now I can provide for my family. So now you took out the fact that I can't even support a cause, because if I support this cause, I can't take care of my wife, my kids, or some people, the whole entire family. So the first time that happened, everyone was hit with, you do anything with hitting your wallet. So guys over there scared to say anything, because it's not about they didn't want to have effects to change. It was more of, I'm going to get cut, you're going to take my money, and then how do I provide? Because I've done everything to get to this sport to be at the highest level. And if I say anything that affects my owner feeling bad, he's cutting me. But now, all the guys that says, cut us if you want, we're shutting the whole league down. So you cut one of us, you cut all of us. So you saw all the NFL players make that video out. The star players, Ezekiel Elliott, Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson, Odell Beckham, the NBA players, all come together, WNBA players, NASCAR. Bubba said, look, it's not about me, it's everybody. So now you trying to say, look, if you come at one of us, you come at us all. So either we're going to come to change, we're going to have some conversations, or we're shutting the league down. And what the league has always understood now is, you affect money, everything changes. I mean, look, you know, you see Papa John's. When old boy said those different little, I'm not going to say what he said, the owner of Papa John's, he got, you know, went sideways, came outside of his mouth. The NFL got affected with the money. Papa John's got affected with the money. So when Chiat came in, he says, if you want me to be an investor, I want equity because I want to tell you what's going on. I want to hear what the foundation said, but I want to tell you what's going on so the community can help change that. He's not in those videos and those commercials because he wants to be the face. He wants everybody to understand, I'm listening to what you're saying, but I'm also going back and taking this to the boardroom. So these guys and girls are like no longer saying, yes, you're going to cut and take our pay because of COVID and everything, but if you cut and take our pay, we're shutting your league down. And as you notice, how many games were affected if people says, oh, we're not coming to practice, we're not playing games, we're not doing races. Lewis Hamilton almost, they came at his neck, says, okay, was it Lewis and Nomi, you can no longer wear certain things, you only wear approved. Well, look, if you're going to do that, then I'm not going to race. Oh, well, we don't want that. Well, I'm not going to play my tennis match. Okay, can we come to a compromise because that's affecting the money. Once you start affecting the money, it's a whole different ball game. And unfortunately, that's what we have to understand. We all know we want to make change and we need to do this to survive, but you start collectively affecting the dollar bills of the owners. Remember, that's where the equity comes at. If you want equity, affect change. Then when you get the change, okay, somebody has to be at the table. Yep. It can't just be one of us. We need somebody at the table that's going to be effective to communicate to them and back to us, but fight for us long term. Like you said, in 3 to 5 years. Shoot, if we see change in 3 years, that's a miracle.
Let me say this. Let me say this. And so as I listen to Eddie, because I'm over here about to jump on my screen.
I saw you. You look like you were going to come through my video.
I'm just about to come through the
yes,
camera.
I'm sorry, Darlene.
And so as I listen to him talk about the owner saying to the players, if you do this, then we're going to take away your money. And so let's talk a little bit. I mean, like when I say a little bit, I'm talking like 60 seconds about the history of America and why power and authority and absolute power and authority and the lack of equity is dangerous. And in the reason why systemic and institutional racism systems exist. And that is a prime example, because to be truthful with you, those types of statements take me back to the mentality of slave and owner. And that is what the problem is in this country, is when you look at 400 years ago, we were, as a race of people, were snatched from our country and brought to America and enslaved. And so for 250 years, we built this country free, not because we got a check or a house or land. We built it for free because we were enslaved. During that whole entire time, you had 25 generations of white people creating wealth, creating laws, creating policies, creating procedures. Then when 150 years ago, they made the decision to make us free, we still weren't free, and they were still creating another 10 generations of wealth. I said generations. So you're talking 350 years of creating wealth and creating opportunity. And it is a problem when you have one race that has a monopoly on the majority of the wealth in this country, that they feel that they can use that wealth to control the voice and the freedom of speech and the freedom of rights of other individuals, freedom of religion, and the whole entire speech and the whole entire because you have money. And so when we as a race, and when we as a society and as people in this country come together like the players did and say, you know what, if you think that you're gonna take all the money from us, we just gonna not play. We ain't gonna do, we gonna all kneel when we get ready to kneel, and we not gonna play. Then I want you to tell me what you gonna tell your sponsors, what you gonna tell your stakeholders, what you gonna tell your fans, who's going to be there and who's going to be present, because now we have come together in unity to hit them where it hurts the most, which is in their pockets. When here's the deal, if they didn't have monopoly over all of the wealth, then they wouldn't be able to do that. It will be a leveling and a more equal playing field. But that is not how this country has been made up. So hence why we have institutional and structural systems that are in play that are detrimental to society as a whole. And we have to really be able to have some true, authentic conversations about racial equity in America. And if we don't, then nothing is going to happen. Nothing is going to change. So I commend the players. I commend the LeBrons. I commend the NFL. I commend the NBA players. I commend them for saying, you know what? If you think you're going to have a business, you can't have a business without us. That's what you call equity. That's what's making them open it. So wherever you have to hit them in order to get them to get on the bandwagon, to have the conversation about change, then that's where you have to hit them at.
Can I touch on that really fast?
Real quick, I want to say something for Brenda, because she about to help bring it home. To tell you how funny this is, because I want you to say this. For a long time during the summertime, we was getting hit hard with every day is a hashtag, right? And it got to the point where you didn't want to look on social media, watch news, or anything. And it got to the point where you can't even look at anybody white or color or racist at all. And I kind of joked a little bit. I said, when the NFL came back, the first game, it was so quiet in the streets, in the media. And I said, it just took y'all to have some football games for y'all to calm down and get quiet. I said, that's it. So the power is in allowing these men and women to actually play a sport, or actually to entertain some people to calm down. Now, I'm not saying they're not going to change, but they wasn't out here attacking us for at least a day or two or that week. And that just shows that, okay, what everyone says, shut up and dribble, just play. But you see the power of sometimes how it does help, because for these last 2 weeks, it has not been as serious as it was this summer. Because this summer, I was kind of like, look, I don't even care about sports. This is getting ridiculous. Then the first time you see an NFL game, Thursday, everybody's excited, quiet, Sunday. And I'm like, it just took football? Man, look, we're going to get y'all back on that field and pay y'all more, because clearly this is what we need, at least to get the conversation to stop that violence. I'm sorry, I just had to say that so we can lead to the DEI lady.
Well,
Yes.
no, I honestly, I'm going to pull from what both you and Darlene said I'm sorry, Jim, we took you off script, but I want to get back to that generational conversation, because it's what you both said. This isn't going to change in 3 years, 5 years. It's not one-stop shopping. We know that. We know this is not, but for some, that's the mentality. So how can we actually help change that from a generational standpoint? And I say this because it's already working at Dolphin. Yes, I'm at the table, but we need, again, allies, and we need others at the table. So what we have what we call a task force. And we meet every other week. But within those task force, we have subcommittees. So people who are passionate about certain things like Black engagement, press engagement, or even like civic impact, they get together, they look for resources, and we disperse it out across the supergroup. That's what we call ourselves, the supergroup. But not only that, when I first started, I had some people who were like Darlene, or in our bracket, our Gen Xers, and they admitted to me when they were growing up, they didn't experience what we did because they weren't Black, so of course they didn't, but they want to learn. That's the key. They want to learn. They want to have these conversations. And then we have the millennials. Again, some of them are on lock. They inspire me. I work with a couple millennials where I'm like, can I be your best friend? So that being said, if we are having, so I look forward to these trainings. They didn't know what they were going to get with these trainings, but we're having these open conversations. They're asking these questions that they didn't know they needed to ask. They're finding out information that they didn't know that existed. Kind of like what Darlene said, the training we had last week, Dianita took them through the same history lesson Darlene just took everybody through on Facebook Live. And a lot of people didn't know that. So how do we make these changes, not from a D&I, but from an equity perspective? The more you teach our allies what has happened and what is happening, they also become that voice. Mm-hmm. And then it gets shared. Again, I'm all about sharing information. And as you can tell, I have a big, loud voice. And that's what I encourage people to do. Use your voice.
Use your voice, Miss Joy. Use your voice. Don't let nobody take your joy away.
Right? Yes. But it's like, use that voice, share your knowledge. As you learn what I'm sharing and what I'm bringing outside vendors in to do, share that information, because the more we get it out there, we can penetrate it. But again, it's not going to happen overnight. If it happened in 3 years, that's when you say amen. But again, it's a work in progress. So we have to continue to do our part in teaching so that we can finally move ahead.
Okay.
I'm done.
Me and Darlene are here for you. Me and Darlene here for you. If you need us to be part of super groups, call me and Darlene. We'll help you out. We got you.
Wait, I have your emails now, so you will be hearing from me.
So, you know what? You guys have, I knew an hour was not long enough. I knew it. It wasn't. But we do have to wrap up. So what I would do, if we have any questions, I will email them to you guys, and so that I can respond back to those questions on Facebook, because I know if I go into another question, we are going to be another 20 minutes. So I want to thank you guys. Thank you, Eddie. Thank you, Darlene. Thank you, Brenda Joy. Oh my God, you guys are big personalities. I'm excited.
We're going to take our show on the road now.
Yes, we need to do a part 2.
Right, a part 2. There you go.
Yes. Thank you so much. Enjoy.
Thank you,
the
Miss
rest
Darlene.
Thank you. Nice meeting you, Eddie,
Thank you,
Darlene, and thank you, Jen.
Yes. All right.
All right.
Bye-bye.
All right.
See y'all in Paris. See y'all in Paris with Darlene.
Yes, in Paris. I'll see you in Paris, sir.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.